All right, so post UFC 309, I thought this would be a pretty appropriate tier list to do. We had multiple moments of absolutely horrible refereeing throughout the night, and I wanted to be able to talk about those mistakes in this way rather than a dedicated video about those specific referees, because this isn't just an issue with one or two referees, this is almost all of them. So I want to be able to call out the refs that I think don't do their job that well, but I also want to highlight the ones that I believe do, and I think they don't get much credit oftentimes because if you're doing your job as a referee, you probably shouldn't be mentioned all that much, right? So I'm going to be ranking the current and active UFC referees with a few of the more famous historical refs thrown in there as well, so we can compare how they refed to how they ref today. I'm not doing every single referee you might see in the octagon, but the ones that we see on a regular basis, you'll know what I mean as we get through this. So let's get started right away. I'm going to leave F tier and S tier for last, so we are going to start in D tier. First referee to go into that D tier spot is going to be Yamasaki. Mario Yamasaki has so many examples of absolutely horrific refereeing, and the funny thing is that he doesn't think he's that bad of a ref. And he's even been defended by certain guys in the space, like John McCarthy and things like that, for some of the horrible decisions that he made as a referee. One example, probably the most famous one, this is what got him blackballed, or whatever, blacklisted, okay, was Valentina Shevchenko versus Priscilla Cachoeira. Priscilla Cachoeira absorbed over 200 unanswered strikes from Valentina Shevchenko. He would not stop the fight. After the fact, he was questioned about it, which I wish we would get back to. We don't see referees questioned anymore, and it drives me crazy. They should have to answer for their horrible decision making at the press conference, in my opinion, but because they work for the commission, that's not the case. When he was asked about this, he claimed that stopping the fight would have denied Priscilla Cachoeira the opportunity to be a warrior. And like I said, he got blacklisted for this. That's where the meme comes from. He wanted Priscilla Cachoeira to go out on her shield, and he made that decision for her, which is absolutely insane. And she was pretty brutally injured in that fight as well. I believe she tore her ACL and ended up being out for quite a while after that. Another example of his bad reffing, pardon me, he stopped Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee had a rear naked choke, no tap. Michael Chiesa did not go unconscious. There's no possibility of a bone break or anything like that, and he just waved it off. Michael Chiesa was absolutely furious, and there's a pretty famous interview where he's mocking Mario Yamasaki for doing the little heart thing that he does before the fight. He had just overall very indecisive decision making, hesitant to stop the fight, doesn't know when to make the call. He's one of those guys that we'll see kind of hop in between two fighters but then hop back out, so he doesn't wave it off, but he definitely makes the fighters think he's about to. Another bad example is he DQ'd Eric Silva for back of the head shots during a finish. They were not back of the head shots, by the way, though I will say I kind of appreciate a referee actually doing something over a foul, or at the very least a perceived foul, like something that he thought was a foul, because nowadays refs just let it happen until, which is wild to me, because back then Mario did not have the ability to use replay. So you couldn't tell if you messed up in that moment, you wouldn't know until after the fact, after the decision's already done. Whereas today, they can call time, use replay, and then make the correct decision. Another example, he let Derek Lewis basically kill Travis Brown and let Ovin St. Preux kill Shogun Hua. So he's got a pretty wide variety of horrible decision making, whether it's late stoppages, early stoppages, trying to allow women to go out on their shields, I guess, or, just horrible refereeing overall. Either way, let's move on to the next referee to get put into that D tier slot. This is going to amaze a lot of people because most individuals, I believe, are going to think that this guy should go into F tier, but you know what? Steve Mazzagati's in D tier. And I'm going to be honest, dude, sometimes I miss Steve Mazzagati. Sometimes. Some examples of his horrendous refereeing. Kevin Burns versus Rumble Johnson. Now, newer fans might think that Chris Weidman is an innovator. He created an eye poke combination in order to finish Bruno Silva, but that's not actually the case. Kevin Burns against Anthony Rumble Johnson he's the OG eye poker. This was brutal. I can't even, watching it back today before I did this video, I was actually amazed. Every single time Kevin Burns threw a jab, he poked Rumble in the eye. So it was kind of hidden in a sense, but you should absolutely be noticing this as a referee. Also, Rumble Johnson was very clearly bothered by it until he took one that was so bad He basically flailed to the ground, and Kevin Burns got on top of him, finished him, and even upon, going back and looking at it, they called it a TKO. Insane. Horrible decision-making from Steve Mazzagatti. Now, this example's outside the UFC, but he allowed Paul Harris, who is one of the dirtiest fighters of all time, to absolutely gouge Jake Shields' eyes, and then ended up getting him in a Kimura. There's the example of Berkman versus Fitch. The guillotine. This is a very famous example, right? Berkman stood up and just kind of let Fitch roll over. His unconscious body just kind of flipped it over. He did it pretty gently. It was decent sportsmanship, but Steve Mazzagatti was the only person that did not realize Fitch was completely out cold, and he was in that choke for a significant period of time. And fortunately for him, his opponent had good enough sportsmanship to let him go, despite the ref not calling it off. We also have Al Turk versus Chet Congo, Rashad Evans versus Forrest Griffin. Horrible late stoppages. Stopped a Ronda fight early. Ronda had an armbar. No tap, no verbal tap. The armbar was not even tight yet. She had not begun to crank on it, and he stopped the fight. Very strange. And of course, the most famous one, the John Jones DQ. Now, I don't have an issue with the DQ per se. Those were very clearly illegal elbows at the time. It's fine if you disagree with the rule, but it is still the rule. The part about this whole scenario that was utterly fucking ridiculous was the reason he stopped the fight was not just because of the elbows. It was because he went up to Matt Hamill after he separated the two and asked him verbally if he wanted to continue. Okay? Matt Hamill is fucking deaf. So he got no response. He got no response from Matt Hamill, and he waved the fight off because Matt Hamill had no idea what he was saying, so he didn't say anything. Absolutely crazy to me. You don't get someone to come in and sign to him. You don't realize that the guy you're reffing is deaf and can't fucking hear you. Unbelievable. Either way, let's move on. Next referee to get put into D tier just earned his spot this last Saturday. Okay, Keith Peterson. Now, I was always one of the guys that would defend Keith Peterson, especially from Dominic Cruz fans, or even Dominic Cruz's accusations towards him. Almost every single time Keith Peterson is reffing a fight, if Dominic Cruz is on commentary, he will either say, oh, good job on the ref to let him keep going there or something, or if he does a bad call, he'll say, see, I told you, like alcohol and cigarettes. It's just annoying because that stoppage, in my opinion, was not that bad. And the issue is that Dominic Cruz now is going to get to pretend like he was correct the whole time. But I just think that Keith Peterson has gotten worse over the years. I don't think that stoppage was that bad. The reason Keith Peterson is in D tier is for one fight and one fight only. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. Because the amount of fouls that he watched and did nothing about is equivalent to other referees' entire careers. I don't understand it. In the first round alone, Michael Chandler poked Charles Oliveira in the eye, cage grabbed twice, hooked the gloves, and also, no, that was it for the first round. Fifth round, hit him in the head, back of the head, 18 times unanswered. After, by the way, rocking him and then eye poking him. Unbelievable. How can you watch 25 plus fouls happen and not do a single thing about them? And referees should be keeping a close eye on Michael Chandler. This guy is an absolute cheating scumfuck piece of shit. Okay, I feel so vindicated. I used to get shit on in my comment sections for going after Michael Chandler. I am happy Conor McGregor stole 2 years of his career. This guy is a scumbag. He eye-poked Justin Gaethje. He fish-hooked Dustin Poirier. He blew snot and blood all in his face. He grabbed the cage. He did all that. He hooked the gloves. He also, in the first Charles Oliveira fight, hit him in the back of the head as well. This is a common occurrence. It's a pattern of behavior from Michael Chandler. And for whatever reason, he has not a single time had a point taken. And in this fight, with Keith Peterson as the ref, he could have been disqualified, to be quite honest. Now, I know we don't like to see disqualifications. It's very anticlimactic. But Jesus fucking Christ, dude. How do you let a guy hit another fighter in the head, back of the head, 18 times and do nothing about it? It is insane to me. Why the fuck are you even there? Moving on. The first referee to get put into C tier. Now, I have a feeling some people are going to be a little bit upset by this based on nostalgia, but he's just not that good of a ref. Dan Miragliotta. Now, An issue, I've got a few issues with Dan Mergliotta. One of them is he took a point from Michael Venom Page for showboating. Now, there was a time when Joe Rogan got upset at Steve Mazzagatti, and the reason I didn't bring this up during the portion where I'm talking about Steve Mazzagatti is because it was actually correct. Nick Diaz was talking shit, swearing to Robbie Lawler, and Steve Mazzagatti called him out for it. Joe Rogan, all condescendingly, is like, I don't know, that's a rule. Acting as though Steve Mazzagatti was making something up on the fly. Now, it is a rule. Abusive language. No abusive language in the fight area. But the examples that are given are like racial slurs or other derogatory language. So basically, if you're swearing at a dude, calling him bitch or whatever, stuff like that, you could technically get in trouble for. The referee could make the decision to tell you to shut up, essentially. And if it doesn't stop, they could take a point. Michael Venom Page was not doing any of that, though. He was showboating. It was movements, you know? So it was very strange of me for Dan Mergliotta to take a point. And I don't even know that he warned him. Although a dishonorable mention here to Michael Venom Page, because I do find it hilarious that he got a point deducted for showboating, and then he openly advocates for the UFC to issue fines for certain kinds of trash talk. But then if he gets punished for trash talk, he gets upset about it. But, you know, doesn't matter. Now, obviously, this didn't happen in the UFC, but Mergliotta is a very prominent UFC ref. He gets praised quite a lot for some reason. Now, that's not even the worst offense. This example should have gotten Dan Mergliotta fired, point blank, period. This is maybe one of the worst reffing moments I've ever seen in my life, and I forgot how bad it was until I watched it back this morning. Stefan Struve pretty handedly was beating Ben Rothwell. And then he got hit with a nasty low blow. Nasty, like a really bad low blow. It was a kick. These are heavyweights. They're throwing big power shots. He was on the ground almost until the very end of the allowed recovery time. And Dan Mergliotta went and convinced him to go fight, to go finish the fight, because he told Stefan Struve, I believe you're up 2 rounds. But if I have to call the fight off, it's going to be a no contest. So Dan Mergliotta goes and acts as a judge in a fight that he is supposed to be reffing, tells Stefan Struve this information that has literally no fucking bearing on anything. Dan Mergliotta is not judging the fight officially. For all he knows, the judges could have it in the exact opposite way. Now, it was pretty clear, in my opinion, that Stefan Struve was winning, but that is not your job. Stefan Struve listens to him, doesn't want to lose half his paycheck, goes out there, loses half his paycheck. Gets finished by Ben Rothwell. Fucking unbelievable, dude. I no idea how that did not get Dan Mergliotta fired. Insane to me. He's also had some very late stoppages I'll throw in there, like Shane Carwin versus Frank Mir. He allowed Patrick Cote to get knocked out with back of the head shots. He allowed Chandler to hit Oliveira in the back of the head in the first fight. So Dan Mergliotta, you know, something about Dan. Actually, I'm going to throw this out there. We often hear him when he's a ref. We hear from him. I think Dan Mergliotta has this weird thing where he wants to be a part of the story of the fight. You know, there's that moment where Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington are kind of embracing each other after, I believe it was their second fight, and Dan Mergliotta broke them up because he got uncomfortable. You know, that they were hugging and shit. I don't know. It's weird. And then, like I said, the MVP one and stuff like this. Like, he's very loud and verbose, but it's like he's having fun because he thinks he's in with the cool kids or something. It drives me a little bit crazy. Let's move on. The next referee to get put into C tier is going to be Mark Goddard. There's probably a bunch of people that think he should be up in like A or S tier, but we can go over it. Now, he does have quite a few early stoppages, although some of them are debatable. He's also very assertive, and sometimes excessively so. Now, I want referees to be assertive to an extent. I don't want guys that are questioning their own decision making, you know, and not being able to get control of a situation. But Mark Goddard literally like scared the shit out of Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega looked like a child, you know, like he was about to get beat by his dad or some shit. He was terrified. Also, like I said, like very assertive and confident in his decision making, which again is not inherently a bad thing. But an example of this is in the third fight with Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier got eye poked. Now, I do want to point out that people bring this up all the time as if like Stipe cheated to win that fight, whatever. Daniel Cormier literally destroyed Stipe's eyes. Stipe had to get surgery on his eyes from the first 2 fights. So it's, you know, obviously it was unfortunate, but it is what it is. Then you have Mark Goddard telling him that it was a punch and to sit down, because DC was trying to complain to him at the end of the round, only to find out later on that it was, in fact, a fucking eye poke, and a pretty bad one at that. Mark Goddard did issue an apology, but just the confidence, or you know what? It's not the right word. The arrogance of him in that time. It was a punch, my friend, sit down. Like, fuck off, pal. Take a look at the big screen. They were rolling it, you know? Crazy. In the Colby-Usman fight, the first one, he allowed Kamaru Usman to fake a groin shot. Very clear kick to the right side of the body. Missed eye pokes from Usman on Colby, but called every single foul that Colby did to Usman. And once Kamaru did eye poke Colby, there had already been so many fouls and so many breaks that he was just like, keep fighting. Like, he just wanted them to keep going. So, very odd. And I say might have, by the way, because of that fake low blow. Of course, Colby did for sure eye poke Usman. So there should have been a stop there, but either way. Also, the stoppage at the end of that fight was a little iffy. It wasn't the worst one in the world, but Colby Covington was, you know, he did have a leg, and he was, a lot of those shots were either going off back of the head or bouncing off arms. Like, they weren't landing unbelievably cleanly. And then we had Jimmy Crute versus Sam Alvey. Now, Sam Alvey had actually complained about Mark Goddard in the past and said that he stops my fights too early. And it happened again here. Jimmy Crute hurt Sam Alvey. There was a moment where he genuinely could have stopped the fight, and I don't think anybody would have complained. And he went to go jump in, jump back out. And then, the second time, though, then he was very quick to pull the trigger. Sam Alvey, all of the shots he was taking were going off his arm. They were not landing to the head. And I have never seen Sam Alvey so angry. I've never seen it. Smiling Sam Alvey was fucking livid, stormed out of the cage. It was crazy. But the reason I don't have him, you know, in F tier or D tier or something like that is because I think some of the stoppages that he gets shit for are not necessarily the worst, and they are kind of debatable. Now, the Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prohaska 1 stoppage was a little iffy. The Israel Adesanya stoppage was a little iffy, but I don't think it's as iffy as people make it out to be. Corey, I've seen him get criticized for Corey Sandhagen versus Marlon Moraes, which I think was a perfectly fine stoppage. But I think part of the reason why so many people don't like Mark Goddard, I think he's such a bad referee, is because of his personality. He can come off as so unbelievably condescending and arrogant when trying to explain his decisions, especially when he goes and does a podcast with Dan Hardy and they're, you know, laughing and acting like everybody that's criticizing him has no fucking idea what we're talking about. And obviously he's, of course, you know, the pro ref, so we should just listen to him. But either way, dude, let's move on. The next referee, I keep going to say fighter, to get put into that C tier is going to be Chris Tognoni. You know what? I can't think of many mistakes he's made, but there's a few that I'm like, you know what, dude, this is really weird. He's just kind of odd to me. So he's way over the top nice, which is an issue, I think, because he can't really be as assertive as he needs to be. There's a fine balance, okay? Mark Goddard, too assertive. Chris Tognoni, not nearly enough. He sounds like a teacher speaking to a 4-year-old when he speaks to these fighters. Like, he's infantilizing them too much, in my opinion. I've seen him make multiple early stoppages in the form of calling off fights during submissions where the fighter was not out, or even in one instance there was, you know, the choke wasn't even what it appeared to be. This one instance I thought was very strange when he went up to Matt Schnell and he goes, I don't know what was worse, the punch or your head bouncing off the canvas. And then he gets no response and he tells him, you'll see it on the replay. Dude, what the fuck are you doing? What do you do? It was like autism at its finest. I don't think he was trying to be malicious. I just think this is another example of him infantilizing the fighters. Like, that's how you would go talk to a kid after he bonked his head or something. It was so weird to me. Like, bro, shut the fuck up. How socially unaware do you have to be? The guy's so sad he just got knocked out, and you go and start making fun of the fucking sound that the back of his head made when it bounced off the canvas. I'm gonna lose it here. I need to get a hold of myself. What the fuck are you doing? Crazy. And if you are genuinely concerned, go talk to him off camera or talk to his team or something. It was so strange. Good lord. He'll also watch fouls occur and just give like soft warnings, you know, or in instances he'll call a fighter out for having their fingers outstretched 4 or 5 times, and then when they actually eye poke somebody, he doesn't do anything about it, and he just gives them another warning. Like, hey guy, you warned him 5 times, right? Why are you not taking a point? So a lack of assertiveness, infantilizing the fighters, and just full-blown social unawareness. And, you know, I don't, like I said, I don't think he was trying to be malicious there with Matt Schnell, but holy shit, dude. I'm trying not to laugh again. That was so funny. Okay, moving on to B tier. Whew. All right. This one's gonna rattle some fucking feathers, okay, boys? Big John McCarthy. Nope, he's not an A tier and he's not an S tier. Get fucked. No, I'm just kidding. Let's talk about it. So, John McCarthy has made a lot of mistakes over the years, and some of which he will not acknowledge, and that actually drives me up the fucking wall, but let's talk about some of them. So, he let Goodridge basically kill a guy. Now, I'll give him a bit of grace for this one, right? This was at like UFC 6. So, they hadn't established all the rules and things like that. They didn't even have a rule for not throwing guys out of the octagon until Tank Abbott came along, and they went, oh shit, yeah, we probably should, you know, write that in somewhere. Now, one that is a little bit later on in the UFC's lifespan, I guess you could say, he made Barilo Bustamante finish his opponent twice when he defended his belt against Matt Lindland. He very clearly got him in an armbar. Matt Lindland very clearly tapped. John McCarthy stopped the fight. Matt Lindland protested, and John McCarthy said, okay, fine, go fight again, basically. And then Bustamante had to go get him in a guillotine and choke him out. It was a very strange situation. I don't think I've ever seen that happen again. Now, he owns this one, and he says, yeah, I fucked up, and that really made me upset. And I believe he said that's the only time I've ever wanted a certain fighter to win a fight, and it was because he felt so bad that he stole Bustamante's win that he was hoping he would win again, because then his mistake would be, I guess, maybe forgiven a bit more. He's had quite a few late stoppages, though, if we go out through, you know, he's had a very long career, so maybe that overshadows some of the mistakes, but ones that stick out to me is Roy Nelson versus Bigfoot Silva. This was a bad one, and it reminds me a little bit of Justin Gaethje versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone, where Gaethje did not want to keep hitting Cowboy, and he got upset at the referee for making him basically hit him more. And Roy Nelson just took this to another level. He fucking kicked John McCarthy in the leg when John was tending to Bigfoot Silva. He got suspended, I think, and fined fairly heavily, if I'm not mistaken, but either way. He was just frustrated, man. You know, he didn't want to dish out extra damage, but Big John wouldn't call the fight off. And one that, till this day, this is a mistake that he still will not acknowledge, and this one drives me crazy. Yoel Romero versus Tim Kennedy. This entire situation could have been avoided had he caught the initial foul. So many people shit on Yoel Romero for this whole debacle, including Tim Kennedy. And it's wild to me, because Tim tries to play and act like Yoel's this super dirty fighter, and a lot of people, you know, who like Tim Kennedy because he's like an American hero or whatever the fuck, just buy it. But the only reason any of this happened was because Tim Kennedy hooked his and pulled Yoel's hand away from his face so he could land them. So, first of all, there's a foul. John McCarthy missed it. Had he called it in the moment, given Yoel time to recover because of the glove grab, his corner probably wouldn't have tried to sneak in the extra time when they were in between rounds. And also, I don't even blame Romero for what happened after that anyways. It's either his corner you blame it on, because they were the ones that were stalling, or you blame it on Big John McCarthy for not getting a handle on the situation. But it would have been easier to get a handle on the situation had he saw the initial foul. But he didn't. And still to this day, he won't acknowledge that he screwed up there, but he will point out that Tim Kennedy hooked the glove, even though that's your job to see it in the moment, okay? He let Daniel Cormier basically die against John Jones. I think that's why DC's got a lazy eye. It's not truly because of Stipe, it's because of John Jones. That was a really late stoppage. And I understand he was trying to give DC every opportunity to recover, but he clearly was not recovering. He would also, in my opinion, sometimes overcompensate for his mistake causing, causing him to make further mistakes. So at UFC 11 with Brian Johnson versus fucking Nasri, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but either way, John allowed a fight to go on way too long, and then he kind of panicked. So it was a late stoppage where the guy was getting the ever-living shit beaten out of him, right? That Nasri guy, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. And then John McCarthy finally realized, oh shit, this is a really bad stoppage. Jumped in very aggressively and broke Brian Johnson's nose. He broke his nose. Holy shit. That's fucking crazy, actually. He busted it pretty damn good, too. Not to mention, he's got this really weird thing about him. This is my least favorite thing about John McCarthy. Now, listen, these are all just criticism. Obviously, for the most part, John McCarthy does a good job reffing. But I think people give him way too much. I think people just don't recognize his mistakes enough. He's got this really weird thing about him where he kind of acts like it's, you know what it is? It's the appeal to authority fallacy, which is kind of annoying because he does it to win arguments. Or like when there's a debate going on about a rule or scoring or a moment of reffing or something like that. And he goes, well, you know, I helped write the rules. And it's like, okay, yeah, but that was like 3 fucking decades ago, dude. The rules have changed. Time has moved on. Imagine a doctor from like the early 1900s or something being like, well, trust me, dude. I helped create lobotomies or some shit. It's like, okay, well, we don't really do that anymore, you know. So you also shouldn't be pointing to yourself as an appeal to authority. It's very strange. Okay, it's very strange. If you want to point to the rules, that's fine. And maybe you can even say that, you know, I remember when we wrote this rule. But don't just point to yourself as like the all-being, all-knowing, fucking omnipresent god of mixed martial arts rules, okay? Because you're not, dude. And I've seen you make lots of mistakes. And it is what it is. Overall, though, pretty good referee, right? Like, we're nitpicking. I mean, the fact that there's probably more examples, but the fact that I only have like 6 or 7 of him, that's why they're B tier. Although some of them are pretty damn bad. Let's move on. That was a big rant. To the next referee, I almost said fighter again, to go into B tier, and that's going to be Mike Beltran. Now, Mike Beltran could honestly be lower on this list or higher, but he doesn't ref that much anymore. He's not one of the most prominent UFC refs. I just included him in here because I believe he's one of the most recognizable. Most UFC fans knows who he is. But the amount of fights that he's refed has dropped off significantly. He has made quite a few mistakes, though, and he's also, in the moment, never going to allow anything to change his mind on a call. He's a little bit like Mark Goddard that way, but I think because he looks cooler, people give him some slack. I think he was in a motorcycle gang too. I could be wrong. If fighters try to tell him about a foul, though, and you know, I understand it's not their job to do so, but he'll literally like fucking yell at them, and oftentimes he does miss fouls. Right? A good example of this is Justin Gaethje versus the dirty scumfuck cheat Michael Chandler, where he eye poked Gaethje. Gaethje tried to tell the ref, and the ref was like, nope, fight on, and would give him no time to recover. And then Justin Gaethje just had to use his corner time in between rounds to recover from an eye poke. So, you know, I can't think of many Mike Beltran mess ups. So maybe if he ref more, I would change my decision. But I think that overall, he's a pretty damn good referee. Also, he knows his grappling very well. He refs jiu-jitsu on a regular basis and shit like that. And I like when refs know what they're talking about, you know, and not just out there. Either way, let's move on to that A tier spot. It's going to be Jason Herzog. Okay, Jason Herzog is a very good referee in my opinion. I can only think of 2 like actually consequential mistakes made by Jason Herzog. One would be not seeing Justin Gaethje tap like 3 times when Khabib had him in that triangle, despite it happening right in front of his fucking face. Okay, that was a very weird moment because usually he is pretty damn good on the money. And the stoppage of Nasruddin Imavov versus Jared Cannonier. But for the most part, like I said, very good referee in my opinion. Never in the way of the fighters. He's able to move because he's, you know, tiny and he's in very good shape. So he's able to get out of the way of dudes. You never see fighters stumbling over him and shit like that. He's also, like Mike Beltran, he's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so he knows what he's looking at. He will take points, though not nearly enough, which is an issue that I have, unfortunately, with every single referee on this tier list. You know, it's not just Jason Herzog. But a good ref should not be spoken about a whole lot. If you remember fights, but you don't remember who the ref is, in my opinion, that's a good sign. Now, maybe you're just autistic and, you know, like somebody could tell me every fucking flag that exists ever. You might be able to tell me the referee of every single fight of all time ever. Maybe. Who knows? But usually, if you think back on a fight and you don't know who the ref was, it means they did their job because they stayed out of it. And, you know, if there were no fouls committed, it could even be in part to the fact that these fighters respect that referee and they know that they're going to get called on it. So, you know, either way. It's like Mark Goddard. Like, I can tell you so many high-profile fights that Mark Goddard has reffed. Or that this next referee has refed, who will be going into F tier. Like I said, we were saving F and S tier for last. It's going to be Herb Dean, baby. Herb Dean is the worst referee in the fucking UFC, period. I don't know how this guy won an award one time for best referee. Insane to me. By the way, Herb Dean makes more than any referee. He makes $500,000 a year. You know, Jason Herzog, I think, makes like 380 or 300, and Mark Goddard makes 300K. Like, Herb Dean makes $500,000 a year. So let's go over some of Herb's mistakes. Why do I have Herb Dean in F tier? Herb Dean has made up rules in the middle of a championship fight, like Merab, Kiss, and O'Malley, which, by the way, his enforcement of that made-up rule got Merab cracked by Sean O'Malley. It could have been much worse, too. Had O'Malley thrown a head kick or something along those lines, you never know, dude. He could have knocked out Merab. All because Herb Dean was uncomfortable with Merab kissing Sean O'Malley on the back of the neck, which is not against the rules. He made up another rule in that fight called excessive coaching, which does not exist. And I've seen people cite it after the fact as if it's a rule, but it's not a rule. Now, he did get lucky, okay, because the concept of the rule that he was trying to enforce does exist. But the alleged gold standard, okay, the gold standard, Herb Dean didn't even know the name of the fucking rule. He's been doing this for decades. How do we not know the name? It's called interference, by the way. Duh, you know. It's crazy to me. By the way, people act like he just started making mistakes recently. Like, back in the day, he let Rockhold basically kill Chris Weidman. Like, brutally. One that drove me insane was fairly recently, and that was Herb taking a point from Imavov from knees that I don't even think were actually illegal against Roman Dolidze. Dolidze had his fingertips down, which, unless you're in, unfortunately, Canada, my home country, or more specifically Ontario, that's not enough to be considered a downed opponent. Even before the rule change, it had to be weight bearing, at least in Las Vegas and, you know, for the most part, the United States. So he takes a point. But the issue with me is the inconsistency. So throughout the course of this fight, this fucking soy trans babysitting having Chris Curtis was yapping to Nasruddin Imavov the entire time.
I will disqualify you. Hey,
it's Curtis and Imavov. Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Swearing at him, yelling at him. Guess what, dude? Herb Dean didn't say a fucking word. No threats, no nothing. No, I'm going to take a point. No, don't do that. Unlike he did less than a year after that against Sean O'Malley and his corner when Tim Welch had said something to Merab. So he's very inconsistent with the way that he applies the rule set. It drives me crazy. Now, I do think some criticisms, pardon me, of him are not great. So one that drove, you know, it caused a lot of people to notice Herb Dean was Dan Hardy lost his mind about Francisco Trinaldo and Jai Herbert. To me, that wasn't that bad of a stoppage. He landed like 2 or 3 extra shots, and they weren't even super clean or super hard. Like, who gives a fuck, dude? They're professional. Relax, you know? Dan Hardy was just spurging out because he was friends with Jai Herbert, and also they had watched what they perceived to be a late stoppage earlier in the card. I believe it was Tanner Bozer. I don't remember who he was fighting, but I don't think that was that bad of a stoppage, you know? There have been times, however, where he steps in as if he's about to stop a fight, and then he changes his mind. Like Trinaldo and Herbert fight, he did that. But even more ridiculously, Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Ribas, he did that brutally. Amanda Ribas was basically finished. Herb Dean jumped in. Rodriguez turned around, went to go walk away because she thought he had stopped the fight. He decided, nah, not gonna. And then Ribas had to get up and take more damage. Or, this is a horrible example, Jorge Masvidal and Donald Cowboy Cerrone. You know, I don't want to go through every shitty stoppage, but I can think of more bad stoppages or more moments, pardon me, for Herb Dean than literally every other referee on this tier list. The only difference is, for some reason, the UFC is less vigilant when it comes to Herb Dean. And even, not even just Herb, but some of the refs that are more famous and more well-known. In my opinion, Herb Dean has made more mistakes than Mario Yamasaki and Steve Mazzagatti combined. Okay? Combined. He is a horrible referee. They just don't blacklist dudes the way that they used to. We see it sometimes, right? Like we saw it at UFC 305. I think they blacklisted a judge. Although the dude that scored Renat Fakhretdinov versus Leal or whatever his name was, 30-27, that guy's name was like Hadi Muhammad Ali. Should have probably been barred as well, you know? But either way, Herb Dean's horrible. I have no idea how anybody thinks this guy's a good referee still, and Joe Rogan unfortunately still says that he's the gold standard. Drives me up the fucking wall. Either way, dude, let's move on. S tier, finally, it's Mark Smith. I bet a bunch of you were probably like, wait, who the fuck's gonna be an S tier? All the refs are up there, and that's because Mark Smith is the best referee. You forget he even exists, okay? In 2023, Mark Smith reffed more fights than any other referee. I think he reffed 65 fights or something like that. And I can't think of a bad, high-profile fuck-up at all. You know, I'm sure he's made mistakes, but they're so far and few in between that, in my opinion, he is the best referee. You never... listen, the fights that I think of... I said this earlier, and I'm kind of going back on it a little bit. Maybe a bit of a contradiction. I said that if you remember a referee, usually they did something wrong for a fight, right? Well, I remember a fight of Mark Smith that he was the ref for, obviously. Charles Oliveira versus Tony Ferguson. At the end of the round, when Charles Oliveira had Tony Ferguson in that very deep armbar, tucked into his armpit, cranking on it, Tony was just gonna let it break. He was just gonna let it break. And if it was another referee, it might have, I think. At the bell, Mark Smith was on that shit like white on fucking rice, and he immediately... both hands applied pressure to stop the extension of the arm. It was his reflexes, I guess you could say. His response time was so quick. Okay, Mark Smith is a fucking fantastic referee. Somebody please tell me in the comments what bad mistake he has made that caused the outcome of a fight to change or caused something bad to happen. Because I can't think of one. Not to mention... dude was a fighter pilot. This guy's a bad motherfucker, okay? Mark Smith's my favorite referee. I think he's the best referee. I think Jason Herzog could be close to S tier, but it's just that when I was thinking of them, I could immediately point to a couple mistakes from Herzog, whereas with Mark Smith, I'm very much struggling to do so. So either way, dude, let me know if you think I missed any high-profile refs that should have been on this list. I'm pretty sure I got most of them. Let me know if you disagree with any of the placements. Tell me why. All that good shit, right? Like, subscribe, all the rest of it. I will see you at the next video. Bye-bye.